let me welcome our first reader, Jacob Strautmann. Raised in Marshall County, Jacob Strautmann is a recipient of the Massachusetts Poetry Fellowship from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. His poems have appeared in Boston Globe, Agni Magazine, Salamander, Southern Humanities Review, Blackbird, and others. His book, The Land of the Dead is Open for Business, is an extended elegy for his home state of West Virginia and its generations of inhabitants sold out by the false promise of the American dream. Throughout the book, voices rise up from the page to describe a landscape eroded and plundered by runaway capitalism, its mountaintops leveled by the industries, its waters polluted by runoff from mines, and the fallout from that waste. He's the department manager of economics at Boston University, where he also teaches playwriting. He lives in Massachusetts with his partner, Valerie Duff, and their 2 children. Please, everyone, help me welcome Jacob Strautmann.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you to the poet and program director and fellow 4-way author, Jennifer Franklin, for pulling the 3 of us together tonight. I'm really moved to share the Zoom stage with John and Yona. John, we're reading together for the 2nd time this year. He and I got to launch my book together back in March, about 6 days before everything shut down. And I'm hoping that by reading with him tonight, we'll start to stitch things back together. A lot of the poems I'll read to you tonight and the poems in the book, they come from my upbringing, or the world around my upbringing in the northern panhandle of West Virginia, areas around Wheeling, or as I'm guessing Yona might say, not quite Pittsburgh. While I'll say it 100 different ways in the book, I want to state unmetaphorically as possible that West Virginia is a beautiful state, and the extractive industries wreak havoc on the land and air and waterways, and when called to account, they usually ring the bell of providing jobs, but the jobs are fewer than they've ever been, and the damage is real. I'm going to start tonight with a poem called For As Long As It Lasts, and It Will Last If Money Can Be Made. And it mentions in the poem Cayford Mountain, which is a spot where you can actually visit to see mountaintop removal in process. For as long as it lasts, and it will last if money can be made. Vega declines west over Cayford Mountain, the blasting at dawn. Even the Assyrians, astronomers who tracked the same star, to predict in hopeless certainty the length of a queen's life, the quality of that life, and in whose death the blank sky shook, would be at a loss to imagine such loss. Wildflowers scooped from underfoot, beating dens choked with fill, manganese streams. Graveyards remain, and the birds who visit on steelies sometimes singing. What will you do now that you know? A company truck emblazoned in white dust descends dumbly towards the sacrificed. The crowns of light drift westerly, and the katydid's filamentous monument, and the rocks wild overburden, and the draglines swoop and spill. Is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, photograph of Wheeling, looking out toward the suspension bridge. And the suspension bridge is going off into nothing. The flooded Wheeling Island and the flooded Ohio landscape beyond. This poem's called Wheeling Baptism. Down on an island tear-shaped as Christ's sandal, fording the river, the flood stage crests, would wash the sinners under were it not for the buckle of I-70 clasping Bridgeport. Front streets, empty storefronts, white, shin deep in the cataclysm of their place, sway to furtive preachers, lurch at whatever wisps below. Tins of negatives, paddlefish ribs, the long dark train maneuvering spring thaw through cores of cinder blocks, squares of light clogged with sediment. They roll away in mourning like a sun. And Pittsburgh does make a couple appearances in the book as the far-off land of milk and honey. This one's called Mercy Prayer. The hills tire of propping what's left, dream to be a trackless plain combed by the wind, long like bored boys in Cameron High's voag for a gun, a tree stand, last night's girl scent lingering. They cup their hands, stay warm, breathe deeply, know the cost of staying, the cost of Pittsburgh is no alternative. Hunker down here like a burial mound on the river. They know a blindness that strikes hunters before dawn, a coy light when deer come best. Some lose their bearing in the mill, the arc torch, icy roof. Some fall from trees and break their necks. I'm driving to her down the ridge. Here always a hummingbird's stutter on the windshield, gravel under tires. Spin us, oh world, spin us a second time. Out Grapevine, out Salt Lick, wield us light. I think when I was putting this book together, I was switching in between two modes, or toward the end, it started to feel like I was. One was more a myth making that was happening, and the other was a mode of witness. I think as I became more aware with the Marcellus Shale fracking boom in my part of the world and how it affected my family, I started thinking more about holding on to parts of the land that were disappearing. Here's one of the poems I think kind of does a little bit of both. And I need to preface this one by saying the Upper Big Branch mine explosion happened in 2010. Many of you may recall. About 29 men died in that explosion. And it may have been prevented if the coal dust had been cleaned up and if the ventilators were working properly. Don Blankenship, who appears in the book a couple times, the CEO of Massey Coal, was convicted of a single misdemeanor charge of conspiring to violate federal mine safety standards and went on to serve a 1-year prison sentence. He called himself a political prisoner of the Obama administration, if you can believe that. This is Report Upper Big Branch Mine Disaster. Beds and boots await the morning light. Gravel clack, air pulsing over teeming barns. Beware. The wind will thicken with them. Strike squarely the legislator's eye. Finger his intake of breath. Refuse all circumlocution. New mantrips hum, and a doe slips through the mountain pass as tin-roofed houses shiver under the euphemism wrongful death. From the hillsides bristling, the wind will thicken with them. Indict the chief executive, hoisted in his tree stand of thought. And I'm sorry to say, I'm going to take you to another coal-related disaster. This one back in 1972 at Buffalo Creek. In order to wash the chemicals off the coal when it comes out of the ground, a lot of companies used to build, and some still do, earthen dams without much engineering behind them that are sometimes referred to as gob piles. And they collect this, this black slurry of toxins and metals that's the worst stuff, the foulest stuff on the planet. And in 1972, in February of that year, one of those dams failed and sent 132 million gallons of water onto the residents of 16 towns downstream. And of the 5,000 people affected, 4,000 were left homeless, 125 were killed. They found bodies in trees. The state of West Virginia worked to get the Pittston Coal Company, which was responsible for the whole thing, off the hook. The governor called it an act of God. This is Buffalo Creek. Some black words. Black as good soil. Blacker than the bull calves blocking the road where trucks idle. Blacker than the oil belly of a thunderhead unload. Wine black the scouring rain. And deluge is the answer. Some words are coup de main, and some canker, snipped aluminum signs, sharp wager that the ends justify the means, a hitch in the governor's swagger before he begins. Some words can snuff like day will night, the lie in the nest the blue jay robs. Some words are white, and when they blow, a wall 30-foot high bolts down the hollow like a cannonball, and men and women die. The name of the book and of this next poem is "The Land of the Dead is Open for Business," and it's something of an inside joke for West Virginians of my generation. You'll be sad to know that it's an allusion to a signage over the interstate as you come into West Virginia. It used to say, "Welcome to wild and wonderful West Virginia." And then sometime in the 90s, I think they lost the wild because it was had a few too many connotations to it. And when then Governor Manchin unveiled the new signs in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think it was early 2000s, you heard a collective groan. They now said, "West Virginia is open for business." And I think it was about 8 years later, just as he became Senator Manchin, someone noted the signs weren't made with West Virginia steel, but steel made in China. And so the signs quickly came down. This is "The Land of the Dead is Open for Business." Take 22 from Pittsburgh International west through Weirton, cross the Ohio. Ride 7 all the way down. To your left, barges, coal black with it. Follansbee coke plant ignites the night that never leaves that other shore. A note in the margin of 1001 love poems, sincerity and tension pillowed in my younger hand, and sequins. Her Sadie Hawkins taffeta caught on a latch stuffed in a cedar box for 20 years. Or the folded swatch of childhood, scented linoleum past, nicked from the sewing room floor where she draped her shoulders over the threshold, and the part of her body with me a stranger. She cranes her neck to guard the black shape of her parents' closed door. Now, she says, nothing's eternal in the land of the dead. And after dinner, stars, vaulting heavens collated, and the ridge black trees and portals whirring fans break my easy phrases. Oh, my beauty should be less for being here. Sad lake hanging from the quicksilver air, quivering. I am writing in the dark an explanation why this place doesn't black itself out, become a necklace of pylons spanning Richmond to Cincinnati. Autobiography of cross-throughs, cuttings, pretense. Is this the way you see it, the further you drift? The way a man driving miles of border between a palace and his home along a silver road admits who is beloved, who is not, pulls to the median, radio off, and awaits the heat of his shock to rise from the wheel and for his wrists to unstiffen and lift like a sound in his throat he cannot clear. Many folks don't think about West Virginia without thinking of her ramps. I'm not talking about the interstate this time, but the the wild onion that grows in only certain places. And if you know where to look, you can find them. I do not know where to look, but the boys in my poem seem to. This is ramp hunting. Look for them on the northern slope, wrapped in spiderlings of shade, the locust spinneret on April. Broad leaves and purple stems, flourishing in pockets that two boys, set free from chores, were sent collecting. Girls' names, like horses' whips, ghost wet shapes on the hillsides half an hour in, and the ramps bulge Kroger sacks. A cigarette passes through the ceremony made of breaking rules. The oldest holds it in and counts, grit and squint, lungs revving, when echoes loud as railroad clangor hammer from the thicket's throat. A doe, pregnant, her mouth webbed with foam, foot pinned to her side, rides, snapping muscles, uphill tearing blind out of a half-lit gully, and like heaven, bends to the stomped out smoke. By a unfortunate quirk of the Civil War, West Virginia has never been deeply motivated to acknowledge its people-owning past. We were taught in 8th grade, we had a study of the state in 8th grade, and we were taught that we became a state to stay out of the South, out of slavery, and we were the good guys in it all. And that lesson wears really thin as you get older and start to take stock of what's really happening in the state and how the Confederate flag, even above the Mason-Dixon line where I'm from, is still flown as decoration and threat. This poem has the word windrows in it, and I assume none of us put up hay in the summer. I could be wrong, but those are the long lines of hay that are gathered usually to dry before they're baled. This is even windrows. Scattered names. The enslaved were meant to be forgotten here. He plows the grave markers, crossing windrows in the field. Stones don't distinguish a man from a burnt down Baptist church, and they fall before the main chair. What could he tell his daughter? Her calloused hands reach from the flatbed for the weight he hoists. A decade later, children call it graveyard field. It grew. Her whirring blade cut sapling, thistle, rodent, snake, and drifted over the mouths of dens, penitent in darkness. And I'm gonna finish off tonight with one more poem that I got the pleasure of reading in the rain at Occupy Boston. I think it was in 2011. This one is called, and just one more time, I want to thank Jennifer for pulling us all together. Thanks so much. The poet arrives at the former site of the John Brown Trailer Park. I crossed the riverbed at Harper's Ferry, southwest for your ribs, Allegheny. There's news. Thursday, rapture-like, everyone moved on, left even Charleston silent, gray, legislators scraping down the Kanawha on sandpapery skin. Your camps and unincorporateds closed their eyes, descended in a blue tattoo of OxyContin. Land of my mothers, but not of my children, of Appalachian redevelopment commissions. Now birds die here, and seeds and summer hayfields molder. Sheep birth limp two-headed things, and some that speak like men if they speak at all. We grew up in a tin can shaking in the wind, stayed as long as we could, bargained the hill like the soul leaves her body for a city full of people and work. You could have noticed, could have called us back, could have called Richmond, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Baltimore. But we cut your metal bonds, vibrating hillsides, your flat acres of not much value, not much music. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Jacob. That was really wonderful. Thanks a lot. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your work. Everyone can look in the chat to see the link to get directly to Jacob's book on the Four Way Books website. Thank you so much. Yona, I am going to unmute you now, or ask you to unmute as I introduce you. Yona Harvey is an American poet and recipient of the Kate Tufts Discovery Award for her first poetry collection, Hemming the Water. Her second book of poetry, You Don't Have to Go to Mars for Love, was just published by Four Way Books. She is among the first Black women to write for Marvel Comics since it was founded in 1939, the first Black woman to write for the Marvel character Storm, and one of two Black women to write for the world of Wakanda. She teaches creative writing, and I got to hear her read one of her first poems from this amazing collection at one of the four-way events in our editor Martha Rhodes' loft, and she read it from her phone. So it was a real pleasure to hear you read that day, and I'm glad to hear you read for longer tonight. Welcome, Yona. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really good to be here. I'm very happy to read with Jacob and John. Thank you, Jennifer, for maneuvering and setting this all up. I know it's not easy. Appreciate it. There's actually so much overlap. I'm glad that I get to read after Jacob, you know. So greetings from the far off milk and honey, Jacob. But you know, I grew up in Cincinnati, which is right on the Kentucky border. So much that you were reading is like resonating, you know, the stores, the land, all that stuff. So yeah, barefoot, jump rope, homemade clothes, all that. That was my whole childhood. So yeah, thanks. I'm gonna read from You Don't Have to Go to Mars for Love. And in this book, I feel like it's a lot of just continued conversations from past, present, and really future too. So all of these three moments in time existing at the same time. And so there's a lot of conversations with artists or activists or people I want to apologize to or say I love or say I'm angry with or whatever. There's a lot of characters that float in and out in that vein. And the only thing I'll say today is that I think I'm just going to read starting at the beginning. So the first poem kind of starts in my paternal grandmother's attic, and then the book to me gets weirder or passes through different stranger spaces as it progresses. Okay, so the first poem is called That. I grew up with pickles. I slept in the attic. Cigarettes, sheets, laced with smoke. The heat of my father's brother's old room. Larry Blackman painted for effect, and Shaka Khan's lips more like a kiss, if a kiss could walk when it came to life. If a kiss could have hips and legs and ass, well, I wanted that. And if the colors could sweat and strip me down to my slit, well, I wanted that too. Nobody knew what I was thinking up there, though maybe they wanted that. Segregation Continuum. And this poem is after Ella Baker, activist Ella Baker and visual artist Glenn Ligon. Ella Baker has an incredible archive. You can hear a lot of the audio for free online. It's incredible. So there's a conversation there. And then Glenn Ligon, I'm sure many of you know this already, has a lot of conversations with Black authors in literature that appear on his canvases. Segregation Continuum. Layered in black on white canvas, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. Looking at the way we look, looking forward, stepping back by way of upturned neck, by way of 3 steps back, looking black coded, by way of black modes, by way of reconstruction, by way of insurrection, by way of colored fountains, by way of elected Democrats or elected aristocrats. It is obvious we are a presence, though we have been discomforted at school gates, at rental offices, at museum entrances. Even we cannot rest who believe in freedom. We are to some an irritant, an tiresome lot. We do not subscribe just because something comes out of a leader's mouth, out of the mouth of a tyrant. So we are too difficult. We are much too difficult. We are much too aware. We are much too marked. We are all that matter to us that matter. We are the most comforting presence by way of nod, by way of pound, by way of sup. We are always fashionable when we do not try. We do not try to insult except when we do, but we do not hesitate to speak of the things about which we agree or disagree. We participate at the level of our thinking, by way of our thinking, by way of our mass expression. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Where once hundreds and even thousands of we ordinary people had taken a position that made us very uncomfortable when we decided, for instance, to walk rather than take the bus. The baseline. I don't know how familiar anyone out there is with my work, but my children, who are really grown people at this point, filter in and out of these spaces too. So at one point, my son was a little jealous that my daughter seemed to have a higher poem count than he did. So I tried to address that a teeny bit in this book. So yeah, this is called The Baseline. Baseline is in basketball, but baseline also is in the concussion test. Okay. The baseline. I was in a neurosurgeon's waiting room awaiting Arrow's test results. He'd slammed his skull on the baseball court and his pupils pulsed cartoony, black spirals and asterisks and loony exclamations. His dizzy days had placed us in the clipboard's teeth, snapping. NBA season, the finals. and Dr. Phil was interviewing a boy who'd killed his mother, bashed his mother's head with a sledgehammer, and set her house on fire. It's ritual, said the doc. It's self-soothing. To bash someone's head, to set a house on fire. Okay, doc. Okay, America. Okay. I forget how daytime gnaws us till evening if we linger too long in its jaws. Everything wrong with us seemed to glow from the insides of a flat screen. I wondered what was up next. A razor, a switchblade, a machete, little bits of bone, the boy's little blonde brother nearly dying too. Okay, homemakers. Okay, ratings. A nurse walked Arrow to an exam room. Free throws and foul shots chatter. Winners and losers, favorite players. LeBron James slept somewhere between games. How many times had Arrow hit his head in the past few years? Bring it in, Arrow said when I joined him. Chill, he said. Did this mean he was the kind of son who'd hug his mother tightly before turning away? The kind of kid who shrugged off blonde boys, the kind of kid who'd leave home at 12 and assemble a band and adorn his fro with feathers and cowries and swear he learned the birds and the bees from Netflix, Grand Theft Auto, and the internet? Okay, worst fears. What was the last thing Arrow remembered? A thwack, the court's distant border. I forget how competitive he gets. I forget how fragile. Diagnosis, no games for 3 weeks. Supervised exercise, rest. Okay, inevitable. My mother didn't care much for television. Turn that stuff off, she'd say. Talk to me. I forget how mustache begins in shadow, how hairlines fade gradually. What makes a child turn? One year, Cleveland fans burned LeBron's jersey. Okay, Christians. Okay, Cavaliers. I forget how every son leaves us at least once. I forget how quiet a house without television. Son, don't bring any spiders home, or lovers, or trash talk. I forget how we bring those anyway. I forget how hypnotic the television. Eat your dinner, son. Eat your dinner. Okay. For the last poem, I feel like in the Zoom space, I'm always shying away from the poems that are a little stranger. So I'll just skip ahead in the book to a poem called The Dream District, January. And in a lot of my work, the snow is an adversary or some form of emotional discontent. So whatever, do with that what you will. Also, it says that my internet connection is unstable. It's weird getting that message. So I don't know, that seems like really creepy, but hopefully you can hear me all the way through. All right. The Dream District, January. January, I'm lost inside your industrial gray. My rig at the ready, my truck trucking, it's ginormous, tires, flat ironing the road. Vivica Fox's mantra on the CB radio, Black Mambo, Black Mambo. More white static and fade. No word from the ladies out there. They know and don't know. They say and don't say. Don't say January. I'm driving past your peculiar highway sign painted Pasadena. January, You know, I'm nowhere near. Pennsylvania's no California, and getting lost exhausts me. January, I pull the air horn on your fog, pull over at a coffee house that looks like a house I know. But where are the woods, the village, and the goddamn snow? All my guilt and shame on the mount of books and poems I ought to know. Now, honey, read this, the Tina Turner lookalike owner says, hands me her copy of an anti-fracking manifesto derived from ancient tea brewing rituals. And by the way, that's all we serve. No coffee at this coffee house. Our specialty is green, Tina says, grown local by the community. All those T's and E's should put me at ease, but my bearings are lost. Where am I? Pasadena, Pennsylvania? Well, make it black and steep it long, I say. The day is wearing down on me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Yona. That was so great. Thank you all for being here. This has been such a great night. So now we have John Murillo. Before I introduce him, I'm going to ask him to unmute. Let me scroll and find John. There he is. Okay, great.
Hey.
Hi, John.
Hello.
Okay. John Murillo is the author of the poetry collection Jump Up the Boogie, originally from Cipher and just reissued from Four Way Books, and his new book, Contemporary American Poetry. He was a finalist for both the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Penn Open Book Award. His honors include a Pushcart Prize, 2 Larry Neal Writers Awards, the J. Howard and Barbara M.J. Wood Prize from the Poetry Foundation, and fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, and the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, as well as the Cave Canem Foundation. His poems have appeared in many journals and anthologies, including American Poetry Review, Poetry, and the Best American Poetry 2017 and 2019. He's assistant professor of English at Wesleyan University and also teaches in the low residency MFA program at Sierra Nevada College. Please help me welcome John Murillo.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Thank you, Jennifer, for putting this together and for all your work promoting this. You mentioned that this is the biggest crowd you guys have drawn, and I think that has half to do with Yona, but the other half with you and the work you put in. So it's been great seeing all the announcements everywhere. I also want to thank Four Way for publishing us and putting these books out into the world and really working as hard as they are during very trying times to get the work into readers' hands. So your efforts have not gone unnoticed. And also I want to just thank my fellow readers. As Jacob mentioned, one of our last live readings before everything went to hell was us together in Massachusetts. Yeah, I miss crowds. This is cool, but I miss people, you know what I mean? But this is cool, I'm glad you guys are here. And Yona, who I adore and whose work I love, this is our first time reading together after all these years, which is crazy. So this is cool to hear your work. Howard University represents HU. All right. So I'm just going to read a few poems from the book, and hopefully you guys will like them. I'm going to start off with the first poem in the book, Oh, also, and I don't know if I did or not, I really want to thank all of you who are here with us. It's Friday night and you're not supposed to be out, but some of you, you know, do go out. But if you go out, you wear a mask. But even if you're not going out, there's other things you could be doing with your time on the internet. So we really appreciate you spending this time with us. So thank you. On professionalism. Oh, really quick, by show of hands, I have a fan on. Is that okay? Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Not sleepwalking, but waking still with my hand on a gun and the gun in a mouth and the mouth on the face of a man on his knees. Autumn of '89, and I'm standing in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cocked, and staring down at this man, then up into the mug of an old woman staring, watering the single sad flower to the left of her stoop, the flower also staring. My engine idling behind me, a slow moaning bass line and the bark of a dead rapper nudging me on, all to say someone's brokenhearted. And this man with the gun in his mouth, this man who, like me, is really little more than a boy, may or may not have something to do with it, may or may not have said a thing or two, betrayed a secret, say, that walked my love away. And why not say it? She adored me, and I, her, more than anyone, anything in life up to then, and then still for 2 decades after, and therefore went for broke, blacked out and woke, having gutted my piggy and pawned all my gold to buy what a homeboy said was a Beretta. Blacked out and woke, my hand on a gun, the gun in a mouth, a man who was really a boy on his knees. And because I loved the girl, I actually paused before I pulled the trigger. Once, twice, 3 times, then panicked not just because the gun jammed, but because what if it hadn't? Because who did I almost become there that afternoon in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cocked with the sad flower staring? Because I knew the girl I loved, no matter how this all played out, would never have me back. Day of damaged ammo or grime that clogged the chamber. Day of faulty rods or springs come loose in my fist. Day nobody died. So why not hallelujah, say amen or thank you? My mother sang for years of God, babes, and fools. My father, lymph node masses fading from his x-rays, said surviving one thing means another comes and kills you. He's dead, and so I trust him. Dead, and so I'd wonder years about the work I left undone. Boy on his knees, a man now, risen, and likely plotting his long way back to me. Fuck it. I tucked my tool like the movie gangsters do and jumped back in my bucket. Cold enough day to make a young man weep. Afternoon when everything or nothing changed forever. The dead rapper grunted, the bass line faded. My spirits whispered something from the trees. I left, then lost the pistol in a storm drain, somewhere between that life and this. Left the pistol in a storm drain, but never got around to wiping away the prints. The next poem is a poem that I seldom read. But I'll read it tonight. It's called On Metaphor. So the first poem is called On Confessionalism. This is called On Metaphor. So there are a few poems in the book with titles like that. I've been asked in a couple recent interviews about that, and the truth of the matter is, I don't really know why I did it. I think the truth is kind of revealing itself to me as I spend more time with the poems, so I can't really say anything intelligent about them now. But the title is On a Metaphor. In back of Daddy's closet, behind the cold and loaded pistol, I find a cedar box of snapshots, his company in camouflage, waving rifles, reefer, and middle fingers at the photographer, at you and at me. And here, the full-lipped red bone he left in the world without a goodbye. Here, a strange boy with my father's forehead, same sullen eyes. Flip the photo, a stranger's name and dates that don't add, scrawled as if rushed, as if a fugitive's note slipped quick to the future. When my mother walks in, I shove the box to the back of the shelf, say nothing of the red bone or the boy. I hand her instead the pistol, a 45, I believe. Its cold barrel swelling in the room's bum light. When she angles it, just so, I think I see my father reflected in the steel. Wait, no, not my father, it's me. Check my time real quick, okay. So some of you may notice that ending borrows, or steals rather, some technique from Yusef Komunyaka's poem, Facing It. I've stolen a lot from Yusef over the years, actually, which is fine because he stole from Robert Hayden and Bob Kaufman. Robert Hayden stole from a lot of people before that, so it's what we do. And somebody's gonna steal from me. And I'll probably feel a way about that, but you know, it's all good. So yeah, Yusef is someone who was a teacher of mine and is a mentor and has come to be a friend over the years. So I wrote this poem, it's called Dear Yusef, and I wanted to, I don't know, I lost one of my other teachers years ago, Philip Levine, and I started to think about how we don't cherish our poets enough while they're still here, right? We wait till they're gone, and then we want to give them flowers then. And I wrote this poem as one in a series of poems that I wanted to dedicate to poets who really meant a lot to me and were here still with us. The other poets just, the other poems that I wrote in the series just weren't good yet. So I'm still working on those. Hopefully they'll get ready for you at some point. Which also, while I'm at it, Toy Derricott is here in the room with us. So I want to shout out Toy Derricott and say thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you. Thank you for all you've done as a poet, as a person, for Cave Canem. If not for Cave Canem, I wouldn't be here. Many other people here would not be here. I would be married to a Cave Canem poet, maybe. So thank you for my wife and everything brought to my life. So thank you, Toy. This poem here is for Yusef. It's called Dear Yusef. Again, last night, you guys hear that? I kind of got the middle of Yusef voice. Again, last night. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. All right. Dear Yusef, again, last night, I caught Medusa sitting in my living room. Not the devil, not the dog in the shadows, made of shadows, not the old translucent maroon sharpening his machete, but Medusa, lighting a spliff, spreading tarot cards across the floor. I didn't startle when a door slammed, but half expected a black cat to run over my shoes. She wore the same red lipstick as the night before, Yusef. Same black teddy with the skinny strap slipped from her shoulder, singing to herself. Her voice split in two, contralto, baritone, balladeer stroking the braids of a woman everyone knows he beats, the woman singing yes, and it's all right. Sequined sleeves hiding every track, a disco ball scattering shards of light along some drab and peeling wall. Medusa cut the deck, relit the spliff, flipped one card, then another, took a pull so long I thought she'd catch fire. You've not always been a good man, she said, showing 7 cards, coughing hard. There was something she wasn't telling me. She liked that I didn't ask, liked how I watched her dusting ashes from her thigh. I see trouble finds you easy, hey boy? I pulled her onto my lap, or I slid myself somehow up under her. I can't remember which. She singing yes, and it's all right. Then slipping the joint fireside first between her lips, she took my face in her hands and shotgunned a cloud into my open mouth. Some nights, Yusef, the serpents curse my name. Some nights, they tell me secrets. All right. You guys doing cool still? All right. That's one thing that I do really miss about the live audience. You can kind of feel people's energy, right? You can feel when they're with you, when their eyes start to glaze over and you're boring them. Yeah, I think I'm gonna read one more poem of my own, which is a short one, and then I want to end with some OPP. About 3 years ago, I think it was, my grandmother died, and when I went out to California for the funeral, I also drove around my old neighborhood in Los Angeles, and I went to visit one of the apartment buildings I lived in when I was a child, and the building wasn't there, and someone who I saw in the neighborhood told me that it had burnt down in the riots of 1992. And it started me to think, because around the same time that I went to California and found this out, there was another period of unrest. I think at the time, Michael Brown had been recently killed, and I was teaching at Hampshire College at the time. And a lot of my students were involved in a lot of the protests at Ferguson. And I started thinking about all the time that had passed since then, how little had changed. And yeah, so this poem is, it's for and from Los Angeles, if that makes any sense. And the title is Mercy, Mercy Me, which is a Marvin Gaye song. And if you know the song, the next line that comes up is things ain't what they used to be. Mercy, mercy me. Crips, Bloods, and butterflies. A sunflower somehow planted in the alley, its broken neck. Maybe memory is all the home you get, and rage where you first learn how fragile the axis upon which everything tilts. But to say you've come to terms with a city that's never loved you might be overstating things a bit. All you know is there was once a walk-up where now sits a lot vacant, and rats in deep grass hide themselves from the day. That one apartment fire set back in '76, one the streets called arson to collect a claim, could not do ultimately what the city itself did, left to its own dank devices some 16 years later. Rebellions, said some, riots, said the rest. In any case, flames, and the home you knew, ash. It's not an actual memory, but you remember it still. A rust-bottomed Datsun, handed down, then stolen, stripped, recovered, and built back from bolts. Driving away in May 1992. What's left of that life quivers in the rear view, the world on fire, and half your head with it. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Really, thank you for being here and spending this time with us. I want to end with this poem. I mentioned Toy, I mentioned Philip and Yusuf. I want to shout out another of my teachers, Martin Espada, who wrote this book, Alabanza. And the title poem, Alabanza, is a tribute to the workers who lost their lives during the attacks on 9/11. Today, marking the anniversary. I wanted to read his poem, put his voice in the air, and also to remember those workers. Alabanza, in praise of Local 100. Alabanza. Praise the cook with a shaven head and a tattoo on his shoulder that said, Oye, a blue-eyed Puerto Rican with people from Fajardo, the harbor of pirates centuries ago. Praise the lighthouse in Fajardo, candle glimmering white to worship the dark saint of the sea, Alabanza. Praise the cook's yellow pirate's cap worn in the name of Roberto Clemente, his plane that flamed into the ocean loaded with cans for Nicaragua, for all the mouths chewing the ash of earthquakes, Alabanza. Praise the kitchen radio, dial clicked even before the dial on the oven, so that music in Spanish rose before bread. Praise the bread, Alabanza. Praise Manhattan, from 107 flights up, like Atlantis glimpsed through the window of an ancient aquarium. Praise the great windows where immigrants from the kitchen could squint and almost see the world, hear the chant of nations, Ecuador, Mexico, República Dominicana, Haiti, Yemen, Ghana, Bangladesh, Alabanza. Praise the kitchen in the morning, where the gas burned blue on every stove and exhaust fans fired their diminutive propellers. Hands cracked eggs with quick thumbs or sliced open cartons to build an altar of cans, Alabanza. Praise the busboy's music, the chime of his dishes and silverware in the tub, Alabanza. Praise the dish dog, the dishwasher who worked that morning because another dishwasher could not stop coughing, or because he needed overtime to pile the sacks of rice and beans for a family floating away on some Caribbean island plagued by frogs, Alabanza. Praise the waitress who heard the radio in the kitchen and sang to herself about a man gone, Alabanza. After the thunder, wilder than thunder, after the shudder deep in the glass of the great windows, after the radio stopped singing like a tree full of terrified frogs, after night burst the dam of day and flooded the kitchen, for a time the stoves glowed in darkness like the lighthouse in Fajardo, like a cook's soul. Soul, I say, even if the dead cannot tell us about the bristles of God's beard because God has no face. Soul, I say, to name the smoke beings flung in constellations across the night sky of this city and cities to come. Alabanza, I say, even if God has no face. Alabanza. When the war began from Manhattan and Kabul, two constellations of smoke rose and drifted to each other, mingling in icy air. And one said with an Afghan tongue, teach me to dance, we have no music here. And the other said with a Spanish tongue, I will teach you, music is all we have. Martín Espada. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of the readers. Oh my gosh, what a great trio. I'm gonna unmute everyone now, so you guys can hear your audience clapping for you, and they can ask questions. Okay. Let's see, unmute all.
Thank you guys so much. You were all brilliantly, elegantly, eloquently spoken. I really have to just put it out there that the last, sorry, I'm talking really loud because I'm passionate about this stuff. But John, do you know of John Hodgin?
The name sounds familiar.
He was a professor at Assumption College. He's written a couple of books. He's a poet / professor. I don't know if he's still a professor. It's now Assumption University. He was an English poetry writing workshop professor that I took with him. I took the class with him, but he read that poem to us in that class. I remembered it, and I remember how he spoke it, and it was nice hearing how he spoke it versus how you spoke it. You pronounced the words a lot better than he did. So I wanted to say thank you for that, because it was nice hearing it from another person's tone, another person's voice. It brought back the memory of that, and it was a good memory. It's a beautiful poem. I have a question for you though. Going back to not your older poems, but the poems you read before. And I'll say this before I ask it, because I don't want to overstep boundaries, but for me, when I write poetry, I'm an avid poet writer. I've written over 850 poems, maybe 1,000 poems in my life. But something that drives me is emotion and passion and pain and sadness and anger and sometimes trauma. Does that drive you at all? Does emotion kind of drive you? Because that's what I was kind of getting it from those poems.
I would say, yeah, to an extent. I mean, I feel like many of us, what we're doing in the poems is trying to, if not process some of the things you mentioned, trauma, grief, right, just our lives. It just so happens that much of my life is comprised of grief and sadness and things like that. So, there's that. I think what we ultimately do is we use the material of our lives for poems, even when we're not writing very personally or confessionally. It colors everything we do, even if we don't think we're writing from personal experience, right? We still can't help but infuse the poems with our own experiences, personalities, memories, imaginations, things like that.
You could just get off.
Thank you for your question. Oh.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Jennifer, I have a comment. This is for Jacob. I made a little chat comment about this, but I grew up in Southwest Central Pennsylvania, which is not that dissimilar from where you came from, and your coal poems really struck a chord for me. I recall when I was a child, my father was a veterinarian, going down into a deep coal mine so my father could treat a sick mule. Mules were used to haul the coal from the active seams out to where the coal was taken up to the surface. And the mules were all blind.
Or blinded.
And blinded and covered with coal dust. It was this, I was a little kid, it was the saddest thing I had ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I got pretty lucky in that my nuclear family was out of coal mining. My dad's a retired construction worker, local number 33. But my extended family, it seemed to be something that was always happening around me. And certainly going to, elementary school, I remember anytime the news came over the radio that there was an accident or a collapse or something like that in the mine, everything stopped and everybody was waiting for answers. And I think that rides with you your whole life. Today, if I hear about workers in China stuck in a mine, I'm glued to the radio the same way.
Yeah.
Other questions? Raise your hand if you're not unmuted. Madeline, we already did you, so we're going to go to someone else. Thank you. Anyone else with?
Jennifer, your unmuting of everybody didn't work.
Okay, let's try that again.
What was that last book that John Murillo held up? Alabanza? Could we say it again?
Okay. It's called Alabanza, and it's selected poems of Martina Espada. And it came out in 2004, I think, 2003. Yeah. Alabanza, which means to praise or to celebrate with words in Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Can I say, can you hear me? No. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay. What a variety of just extraordinary work. Just lovely to hear each of you. And Jacob, we know your work. And since people are talking about the past, I went to school in Pittsburgh enough years ago that on the occasional little prison breaks, I went to college in Pittsburgh. When I got out of, the center of Pittsburgh, I would see shale piles and, evidence of all of this. And
okay,
poems.
You done? Me too.
And yeah, and your poems really, they're visceral. Plus, we have family in California. It's a different thing with the fires now, and yet it isn't. And yet it isn't a different thing. It's so I'm assuming that all of us are sort of raw emotions now.
Yes.
About so many things, and so all of your work is
touched
just
on so many things.
Yeah, it's just a great treat. Thank
This was amazing. It was fabulous.
Thanks so much, Ronnie and Richard. Great to see you guys.
Me too.
So such a pleasure to hear you read, which we didn't get to do. So that was just long last. Hooray.
Yeah, and you guys have been such a great audience. Thank you all for being here. I think some people who aren't muted, who are still on mute, have maybe not taken the opportunity to unmute themselves, but everyone has been asked to unmute. If there's any other questions, you can raise your hand. I got one note that the code isn't working, so I'll write to Clarissa, and if you're having a problem with the code, we will email you. I think there can't be any space between HVWC.
It
is working. Actually, it works.
It does work. Okay.
Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
I have a quick question for Yona. You mentioned an interview with Ella Baker, and I missed who that interviewer was because I would like to hear it.
No, it's that lady.
It's an audio archive. So if you search for Ella Baker and archive, it'll probably be your first hit if you go there.
Thank you.
You can hear lots of recordings.
Okay, thank you.